Hey, I'm Commando Larry. Today we're going to be talking about 8 HP transmissions, why you need one, why they're so awesome, and all the details that go into swapping one. I've done this quite a bit, so I'm going to cover all the things I learned so you don't have to. So my experience with 8 HP transmissions. I run a European auto repair shop. 8 HPs, or all the HP ZF transmissions, have been in the European vehicles for years. We've been making repairs to these transmissions for these 10 years now. And so I'm very knowledgeable around these transmissions. I have done a swap in this Jeep. I've been through 3 different control units to find the best fit for this. And I have my wife's Toyota, which also has an 8 HP in it behind the stock Toyota transmission running a stock Toyota ECU. We're going to talk about all the different ECUs, why, which one's better for certain applications and which ones you don't want to dive into, okay? There's a lot to cover, so I might use some notes here. But the current on the market, this is 2025, almost 2026. The current control units on the market that are popular is Powertrain Control Solutions. Russell from German Sound developed a kit that works really good. It's a good, nice option. The other option, very popular, it's probably been around for probably the longest, is the Turbo Lamic. This is out of Poland, I believe. I have this one installed. It works really good. The other one that is popular, it's coming on the scene, is called CAN TCU. That's more in Europe. We're not seeing that here a whole lot. It's only really working with certain aftermarket and factory control units. It's not working with Holley, so it's probably why it's not more popular here right now. The other one that is coming online that is everybody's talking about is the Max ECU control unit. That is actually a really interesting one. It is reflashing the valve body that's in these transmissions and then running its own standalone ECU for the engine controller and the transmission as one package. This is its own ecosystem. So if you're not running a Max ECU for the engine control unit, this is not really an option either. So I don't have any Max ECU, so I've never touched that stuff. And it's pretty new to the market. The other one is HTG. This was really on when Turbo Lamic was coming online. HTG was right there with them. And they seemed like these were neck and neck. Like ones, you couldn't discern which one was better than the other. In popularity, they seemed to be equal. HTG is now dead. They have stopped development on it. The people that have them are not in love with them anymore. I had an HTG installed in this Commando. I had it running with CAN bus with the Holley system. It actually worked reasonably okay, but it definitely had some things that were lackluster because of the lacking of support and that ECU dying, and it didn't shift well at times. I just took it out pretty quickly. So there's that one. And then the last one that we're seeing coming out, we're seeing is Blueprint Engines, which makes engine packages. They have a 8 HP kit that is I think it's like a 525 horsepower LS3 with an 8 HP bolted to it, running their factory ECU as one integrated system. It's whole plug and play to a car. So those are the options that are out there. We're gonna discuss each one with a little detail to discuss why you'd pick one or the other. I'm gonna say about more of the things that I know about each of them, because like I said, some of these I've never touched because they're just not out there for us. Like I'm not gonna buy a Blueprint engine because I don't have anything that needs it, right? So let's go into Turbo Lamic, because that's my favorite one of all of these at the moment. Turbo Lamic does have some challenges, right? One of the big challenges that everybody talks about is let me get this out of here, is you have to modify the mechatronic unit, okay? The mechatronic is this thing. It's just an electronic control panel. It's basically, this is the TCU. It has an external wiring connector and then a connector for all the different solenoids, a output shaft speed sensor, and an input shaft speed sensor. That's all that this thing is. The big challenge that people struggle with the Turbo Lamic is you need to take this apart a little bit further, cut this cover off, expose the PCM that's in there, or the TCU that's in there, basically cut it all out, and then resolder wires so that now, instead of having the TCU being controlling, you're going to use this connection, this wiring harness, to externally control the transmission. There is some pretty slick options when you're making this change. This is actually for HTG. This was sold by Seems Legit. The difference, the HTG ones don't fit the Turbolamic ones because of the pull resistors. So this is garbage to me, but it gets the point across. You cut this open, and this gets soldered in place. So imagine this cut open, and all these little tabs here align to where all the internal wiring is at, and you just solder each one, right? So then once that's the solder in place, you take potting compound and you basically epoxy this in place so it can't vibrate and crack the solder joints. This is what I've done with this one. I did it myself. If you're not interested in doing this, I think Dami Works will do it for you. They're in Sweden. Seems Legit seems to be doing it. They're in Chicago area, I believe. And so if you don't want to go through this kind of, you're not into soldering or not into wiring, this is a nice option for have somebody else do it for you. This is not hard to take off of the valve body. The valve bodies on these are not like old, Turbo 400s, Turbo 350s, 480s. There's no little check valves in here. So the valve body is a big chunk. And this is as it comes out. So this is dirty because it's laying around my garage. I bought this because I needed another mechatronics, because when I switched from HTG to Turbolamic, I already had a HDD soldered into this and I couldn't undo it. So I bought a used one. But these are easy to take off. There's only a handful of bolts in here. The bolts that have a different shape heads, you just undo those bolts only, and this whole unit just comes off. There are 2 little seals and this O-ring. That's it, the sealing to the valve body or to the transmission itself. This is actually very easy. It might be seem overwhelming for a novice or somebody that's new to DIY stuff or taking challenges like this on, but this really isn't challenging. This is not hard. But it's probably one of the most, things people go, oh, no, not that. So that's how the internal valving or internal wiring is handled with Turbolamic. The next thing people question with Turbolamic is shifters. Turbolamic is working on Dodge shifters. Dodge shifters are great. They're cheap and they're abundant. So the 2 main Dodge shifters you see are this unit, which is out of a 392 Jeep, and this unit that is out of the Challengers. You could also run a CAN keypad, which is the little generic CAN keypads, and you just have it marked park, reverse, neutral, drive, and then you can also run the drift shifter, which the drift shifter you see out there, I've heard reports of these switches suck in those things. So take it for what they are. The other nice option is, which I'm running in this one, is a BMW shifter out of the F cars. So then that is abundance. There's a ton of them out there. The documentation on Turbolamic's website has a pretty good documentation as to what shifters, how to wire them. So that's the shifter stuff. Wiring is really straightforward. Okay, on Turbolamic, you have 2 options on how to make this thing function. You can run it with CAN data from the engine control unit, or you can run it as analog. So CAN data means the Holley, that's why I'm using Holley, sends CAN data to the Turbolamic, and the Turbolamic takes off whatever data it feels useful. It's RPM, it's throttle position, engine load, stuff like that. And then it knows what to do with the transmission. It does not care about vehicle speed. You don't need a vehicle speed sensor. It has an output shaft speed sensor to figure that out for itself. So that's how it integrates with the Turbolamic. There is, when you connect a Holley to this, the big thing that took me a while to pull the trigger when I was looking at any control unit for all these things was torque management, because the factory transmissions heavily relied on torque management to make these things live. So this is just like an Allison. It's a clutch-to-clutch transmission, so there's no bands. So it means it has to be electronically controlled, and the timing of these controls are very critical. Torque management is basically they take engine power out of the engine, they make the transmission shift, and then they apply the power back into the engine. In my Jeep here, we have active torque management. It's pretty cool how this was accomplished. This was a project that Dr. EFI and Lucas at Turbolamic created. What they did is they take the CAN data, then they output CAN data as if it's the Holley IO boxes. So it's a native Holley product. They emulate a 5-volt signal. And basically what Holley does is they make a 2D table to say, hey, when you're making shifts, when the Turbolamic's making a shift, torque management retard the timing depending on engine load. So that's how they're handling torque management. It's pretty clever. You can't even feel it happening, but you can watch the turbo or watch the Holley data. It is actively doing it. It's actively taking a significant amount of timing in and out of the vehicle depending on load. It might be as little as like 1 or 2 degrees with real light load, but when you're smashing on this thing, it might take 8 or 10 degrees of timing out of it to really pull the power out for that shifts. So that's why the CAN data is critical for this stuff to work right, is you're really trying to preserve the transmission. Oh, the other thing with a Turbolamic that makes that my popular choice is it has different modes, and you can program the modes to be different things. When you buy the Turbolamic, they're pre-programmed for you. A P1 is dead stock automatic. This drives like normal. It just drives like a factory car. It does surprisingly well. It does have a manual function, but it's kind of weird. It wants to kick back to automatic constantly. There's also a launch mode in there. There's also a transmit mode in there. I don't use any of those. But if you're into drifting, if you're into drag racing, there's stuff there for you. I use P7, which is a full manual mode and a full automatic mode. So depending on where the shifter's at, so you can't move these shifters unless the engine's running. So you can kind of wince a little bit, but the shifter won't actually move around until the engine's running or connected to things. Let's say you're in P7, put it in auto mode, and then you shift it, you pull it to the left. Now in P7 in the Turbolamic, it's in full manual mode. This is not the same as like a BMW, where a BMW, you can put it in manual mode and you wood the car and you just never touch the shifter again. A BMW with an 8 HP, it'll just keep upshifting and says, well, you don't know what you're doing. You're obviously not paying attention. It'll keep shifting. The Turbolamic in P7 says, nope, you want this to go. So we're going to make it go until either you shift it or it blows up. This is super critical for, like, I'm rock crawling in mine. If you're drifting, P7's your friend, right? You can run P7 with paddle shifters. So that's how I always use mine. I'm always either going to be manually shifting it and I'm hauling butt doing something, or we're just kind of cruising and it's automatic. P7 lets you do that pretty simply. So I prefer that in Turbolamic. For people interested in drift cars and doing clutch kicks, Turbolamic has options for that. You can add a clutch pedal. It's a dead pedal. You can make feeling with springs in there and a linear potentiometer, so it knows where it's at. But you definitely can run clutch kicks and bang shifters, make this thing a drift car if that's your application. Turbolamic has that for you. Talked about torque management. Let's talk about some issues that I've had with Turbolamic in mine. Because I've had 2 Turbolamic ECUs in this thing now. The first one was when I drive this vehicle for an hour, 2 hours, I would get a overheat code from the ECU for the drivers. I went back and forth with Lucas and diagnosing this. End result was to replace the TCU. So he sent me a new one free of charge. I'd only had it in here for 6-8 months, and it had done it inconsistently or intermittently the entire time. So I'd get this, I think it was a P087 code, or it's a 087, not a P, which means the drivers are overheating. It always worked fine. It never stopped working, but it definitely had this fault that would flash on the little LCD display. That was corrected by just replacing the ECU, the TCU. The other problem I struggled with was the dreaded 033 fault, which means your CAN data is not being received correctly from the Turbolamic. When you get that fault code, the car goes boop to neutral. So if you're driving and you get that fault, it goes into neutral. You can shift it into park. It really won't go there until the car stopped. It sucks, right? That took me months to figure out. On this, it was actually caused by a Holley wiring harness problem. The fuses, Holley they didn't segregate the fuses. So you had one fuse in their stock wiring harness from Holley. The stock fuse and relay ran the fuel pump the injectors in the ignition coils, and there's just too much amp draw. There's a 40 amp fuse. So all I did to fix it is I put 4 fuses and put 4 relays, and that fixed my CAN bus communication fault. It took me forever to find because it took hours of driving before that fault occurred. And then why it was occurring, I wasn't sure if it was the thermodynamic overheating, if it was something else happening. So it took me some time to find that. But that ended up being a harness problem from Holley. Fixed now. And I have several thousand miles with this vehicle and have never seen that fault again. So we're good. One thing I truly dislike about Thermodynamic, their tuning software is archaic. It is written on the old RT Tuner Pro, which if anybody's familiar with when Megasquirt came out first, that's how it was tuned. We're going back 20 plus years to Megasquirt stuff. It's written on that platform. That's the same platform you might see if you're doing the old OBD1 tuners. And so you would pull a file off of the chipset, it would put into hexadecimal code, it would be translated into something else, and you'd have all these bin files. That's how the Thermodynamic is tuned. You have to have the definitions of what all these bin files are to make sense out of them when you open the tuner. It's okay documented as far as what bin file is doing what, but some of it is not intuitive. I think Dr. EFI, who's on the Holley forum pretty consistently, I think he's offering some tuning. I also connected with Lucas on the WhatsApp, the phone app thing, and he helped me to tune my 7th to 8th gear change, made a pretty good improvement. So, but to be fair, the documentation sucks. And without Lucas's help on the tuning, and without Dr. EFI's help, I probably would not have gotten there as successfully. Luckily, the resources are out there, but the software, man, I hope they fix that, because that is crusty old stuff at this point. So that's what I hate about it. Oh, another issue that probably is not talked about, it's not an issue, it's noticeable at times, is the Thermodynamic has to downshift through every single gear. It's not allowed to skip gears. So if you're looking at BMWs, hey, we're going to love BMWs, you might see a BMW go from 6th to 2nd, right? Or 6th to 3rd. The Thermodynamic won't do that. So if you are really hauling and you are slamming on the brakes, you really have to be downshifting to get that transmission to be where you want it to be when it's time to put the power back on. It's probably an issue for drift guys, for road race guys. If you're hauling butt in the desert, it bugs me every once in a while. It's not a problem. You don't notice it much, but the transmission has to downshift. So if you're in 8th gear and you slam on the brakes, you got to go 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, and then you can now reapply power, right? If you don't, you may not be where you think you are, and you might lug the car. So it's a little funky, but it's only on weird instances do you see it. All right, and the last control unit that we're going to talk about is going to be the HTG. This is going to fall right in line with almost everything I said with Thermodynamic. HTG, same thing. The biggest difference, HTG's out of business or going out of business, or they're done. I actually had an HTG installed in my Commando. I didn't have it in there very long. It actually worked with CAN bus. It worked with the shifters. The installation document was okay. I did take several phone calls with whatever the guy's name that was the owner of HTG to get it to work right. The tuning in those were archaic. You tuned it off vehicle speed, and if you had any weirdness in there, the transmission didn't know what to do, so it would surge between two things at once sometimes. Anyways, it doesn't matter. If you have an opportunity to go buy an HTG and it's a really, really good deal, keep looking. It's not a good deal. I think there's enough out there that people can still use them. They do work. I can't say they don't work. I think the bigger trouble people saw with HTGs was it was a universal thing. And so you saw a lot of guys running direct clutch transmissions. So like your DSGs, like in your Volkswagens, and they were running crazy timing tables in these and burning up the drivers because the drivers were constantly doing weird stuff. I think that was the demise of HTG, or one of them. I think there's a guy named Adam that was working on firmware and tech support with HTG. But I'm going to tell you, I don't know. I know there's a couple of Facebook groups on it. I took mine out and sold it. But I said it was fully working. Hopefully the guy that bought it can find use for it and it's going to work for him. So that's it for after controllers. We're going to move on to all the other little gritties that make this all come together. So there's several different 8 HP transmissions. This is not an 8 HP. This is a A340 out of a Toyota. They got replaced by an 8 HP. So this is an 8 HP out of a Dodge. This one in particular is a 4-wheel drive Dodge Hemi. I believe it's like a 2014-ish. Any of the 2014 Hemis. The one thing you will see when you're looking at the junkyard stuff, you'll see them listed as a ZF or something RFE. From my understanding, the RFE ones are still ZF ones. And so it sounds like an RFE is a NASN or something. It's not. ZF did with Dodge. ZF licensed them, Dodge, to make these transmissions. So this one happened to be a Dodge unit that is from Germany as a ZF. You can also find these that are an 8HP70 that doesn't have any ZF markings on it. It's still an 8HP. The difference is Dodge built everything in it. The other huge importance, because in the United States, the Dodge one's going to be your most likely option, whether it be in a Hellcat. Well, the Hellcat's going to be an 8HP90, whether it's in a Durango or whatever. Whatever had an HP in it. It was always the V8s in almost all the cars that Dodge had, Dodge Jeep has. The big difference, beyond the 2-wheel drive, 4-wheel drive back here, from here up, they're all the same. From here down, they're different. So from this hole down is different from a 2-wheel drive to a 4-wheel drive. So if you buy, mind you, I have not seen a single vendor that sold a 4-wheel drive option for an adapter plate for this. So if you're running 4-wheel drive stuff, all my stuff's 4-wheel drive, know that none of these holes are going to line up. So we're going to talk about that when we get there, but know that that's a difference. The other place you're going to find these transmissions or vehicles, you're going to find them in your weird stuff, your Maseratis, your Lamborghinis, all kinds of stuff like that. The other common one is Jaguars. Jaguars, Land Rovers. Super duper common in a 2-wheel drive or a 4-wheel drive. I don't know the bells and configurations. I don't use them. The other super duper common stuff is the BMW X5s, mostly in the diesels, and the BMW 650s and 750s, maybe the 850s. They're all going to run 8HP70s. The BMWs, they fall into 2 categories, a 6-cylinder and an 8-cylinder. The 6-cylinder and 8-cylinders have different bolt patterns. So it's a whole different bell housing here. So the 6-cylinders look more like, the V8s look more like this, and it's a flat kind of triangle looking thing. The 6-cylinders all are shifted to one side, which this, inline 6 one side. The inline 6s in the United States as an HP70 are not very common. Like I said, most of them are going to see come in at an N57, which is a diesel BMW. We don't get a lot of those, and so they're hard to come up with. All over Europe, you're going to see that's a normal transmission. That's real common. We don't get those. So here in the U.S., Dodge Hemi's your friend. I am starting to see some other people come online with Lion stuff, the Jag stuff. That stuff's all new and coming. So I will say the Jag stuff, the Land Rover stuff are cheap because the car dies. So the Land Rover Jaguar have high engine failures, and so those transmissions are cheap. But the Dodge stuff, they're so plentiful, they're cheap also. This Dodge transmission, I paid $400 for. That's it, $400. So yeah, bear that in mind. The BMW stuff, the V8 stuff is cheap. I don't know why that stuff's cheap. The N57 transmissions, which are the most popular adapter out there, are the most expensive transmissions here in the United States. When I was looking for one, I would see them at the low end at $1,000, and the high end was like $3,000 for a used transmission. So I don't think that's a viable option here in the United States. So if you're going to go that direction, just go buy a new one from Dodge. They're $3,000. So yeah, let's move on to adapters. Yep, adapters. Okay, so we already started talking about the bolt patterns are different. And so how do I deal with that? So I'm using mostly dummy work adapters. They seem to be the big powerhouse for adapters out there. The dummy work stuff, they are beautifully machined. What I do if I'm on a 4-wheel drive application, the dummy work, one side of them have a whole lot of lightning to it. So it's like this has all these little cavities. Imagine a 1-inch solid piece of aluminum, and they lightened it with a whole bunch of cavities, you know, in a pattern that makes sense. When I ordered one from Dami, I told them, do not mill out the excess material. Leave it all in there. So then now the bolt holes are there, but this is all solid aluminum. And then I just use the dowel pins here, stand the transmission up on its end, do a transfer punch, and drill some holes. So that's how I get a 8 HP 70 4-wheel drive, all the bolt holes to work, and an adapter that I can just buy. Why this is different in the Dodge products is when the motor's here on the side of the block, there's these little adapters here, and they are based on, you know, the engine. They're obviously not going to work on an LS application, so that takes up all this space. So that's why there's a difference between the two of them. So there's different adapters, 2-wheel drive, 4-wheel drive. It doesn't apply to what we use. These don't have a shifter. There's no direct connection between the transmission and the shifter. It's all electronic. So park is a problem for these, especially as a project car. So on all of them, the BMWs and the Dodge ones, they have the shift lever coming out the side of them. The BMW ones have a bolt hole that goes up from the pan, and then it will allow you to screw that bolt up, and it pushes and disengages the park paw that's in here. On the Dodges, that's not an option. There is, Seems Legit makes something, or at least they sell something. And there's another company out there that Dr. EFI was just showcasing for how to put something in neutral. This is super important if you're like my Jeep. If this thing ever has a problem and I want to not run the engine and put this thing neutral. Important stuff. If it's your hot rod broke down the side of the road and you want to have it towed, you need to have a way to put it in neutral. So what this does, the cable, so that you can locate this stuff somewhere else. It's a basic bracket that goes on the transmission. So this bracket, bolt hole, right? I know it's a threaded section here, which the threads are going to cut, but you're not going to use this very often, so that's not a real problem. And then there's a bracket for the cable, and then somewhere else in the car, the glove box, center console, you then can pull this and get this to go pull on the park paw release. I have this, I've never installed it because it's been reliable enough that I haven't needed it. But that's the gist, that in emergency, this is how it works. BMWs, they had a deal where you take this cup holder off and they had a big knob you would turn to get the transmissions in neutral. Jaguar uses the bolt on the side of this. BMW 650s, bolt on the side of it. You need to have some kind of way to get these to neutral. So that's the neutral scenario. So the other weird thing about the Dami work adapters that people get weirded out about is you're on the stock torque converter, and then you're going to run whatever stock flex plate was in whatever engine you have in front of it. I'm running LS stuff, pretty simple there. 2JG, 2JZs, whatever it is, stock flex plate. And then they have this adapter to meld the two together that's spaced according to their spacer here, and then a hub-centric ring. I thought that was weird until I used them, and man, that works fantastic. They do a really good job of picking up this ring, this hub-centric center, and these bolts. They do a really, really good job, and I thought that was not going to work as well as it does. But after installing 2 different of the Dami work adapters, I prefer it to the other ones. So if you see that where it's this weird disc, and that just seems weird, don't be weirded out by that. That works really, really well. And they're able to make several different adapters without big design changes, without worrying about, ring gear offsets and tooth count of ring gears, what starter you're running. You're running all the factory starter, the factory ring gear. So all that gets out of the equation. So if that works from the factory, it works with the Dami work adapter. So don't look at that as a problem. Look at that as a really good solution. So that's about the other thing in Dami work, because on my Toyota swap, nobody made an adapter. It's a Toyota 5 ZFE, the 3.4 liter Toyota. The beam transmission was very similar. And so I told Dami work to send me a beam adapter with no starter position and a solid. I didn't realize at the time that the offset was different. So in the beam engines, The Toyota Beam engines, the engine leaned to one side. So I had to redraw it with them. They helped me get there and then reclock it. They were very, very open to custom stuff. So I can draw things in CAD, which helped me immensely. I redrew the starter location, redrew the degree of tilt on the bell housing alignment, and then sent it back to them. We went and verified back and forth. I think it took them 2 months because they have a 1 month lead time on all their adapters. So they're just doing batches, but they were very easy to work with, very communicative. I think he even on Sunday, he was emailing me back saying, "Hey, I got your email. Here's what we're going to do. Here's this. They were superior to work with. It was fantastic. If you have something weird, don't worry about it. The other thing to know on the adapters is on the LSs at least, and probably others, is they can swap the starter location. So on the LSs, the starter's over here. For some reason, you need it over there. You can ask them to put it over there. Pretty straightforward. On all of these that I've done, the LSs and the Toyota, you have to clearance the transmission. So you see like this little hole right here where I carved it out. This is where the nose of the starter is going in, where the stock transmission was in the way. The LS, I want to say, was somewhere else. You have to hog it out and cut it out. It doesn't need to be pretty. You can make it pretty. You can make it fancy. You can make it not. It doesn't matter. But know that you're going to have to be cutting on your bell housing. Don't be scared of this. It's just part of the deal. The other thing that I saw DamiWorks do is they are making, I think for the 2JZ, they're making a whole billet bell housing or cast bell housing that's now then machined. So some of this may not be as much of a deal. I do believe that's what blueprinted engines, that's what they've done, is they took a stock ZF backside. They didn't do anything there, and they bolt on a bell housing to the LS. So I bet you in the long run, that's the direction everybody goes. So I think it's a much cleaner install, but for now it's adapter plates. The other big company you're going to see out there or adapter plates is Adamant Performance. Actually, that's the adapter I have on this. The Adamant ones, or Adamant, whatever that is, how it's said, gives you a completely new ring gear flex plate and adapter. It did a pretty cool thing where it has little chunks that bolt into, because this bolt was so close to where the LS bolt also is. They made this little block. DamiWorks handles this differently. After owning both of them, I don't think I'd order another Adamant Performance adapter. Not that they're bad. I just think the DamiWorks are nicer and they're easier to deal with, and they're pretty fast. So out of the two, that's the one I would choose with DamiWorks. If you're looking at, let's say, a OM606, which is the diesel Mercedes engine, or any other diesel Mercedes, the only option I see out there is Diesel Pump UK is making an adapter. He's running the Land Rover Jaguar transmission. And there was somebody else coming online that was making another adapter, but I don't recall what transmissions they were focusing on. I believe they're working on the BMW 650 transmissions, but I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to see more and more and more adapters online, because this is becoming so popular. All right, so one of the big things, when I had a 480E in this Jeep, I struggled with keeping the transmission cool. If it was hauling ass down the highway, it struggled. If it was on the trail all day and great at cutting grades, man, the train temps were always hot, right? We're talking like 250, 280 sometimes. Since I went to HP, oof, all the problems are gone. So this transmission actually struggles to get up to temperature. And why it's doing this is it's a real small torque converter. It locks up the torque converter a lot, so you don't have the heat building up in the torque converter. And you're constantly shifting it, so you don't need to slip the torque converter as much, which builds heat. So these need to get to 60 degrees C. If they're not getting to 60 degrees C, any computer, I don't care what it is, the factory computer, the Turbolamic, they don't do the adaptations well, or at all. They don't even do it to 60 degrees C. So you have to get these to temperature. My big Jeep, big tires, making good horsepower, it gets there, within 20 minutes driving, which is okay. But if you're in a car, you're not going to get there. So you need to be aware of transmission coolers. So this is an improved racing transmission controller. This works really, really nice. It's a nice little unit. This goes in line between the transmission to the cooler. Pretty slick unit there. They're pretty reasonably priced. But now you got to look at how do you get from these cooler lines, which were factory slip O-rings, because the factory had this giant cooler assembly here, except to be on the Dodges, they're a giant cooler. On the BMW, they run to the radiator, and the radiator has a thermostat built into it. So the stock one, Dodges, thermostat's built in here with the cooler. BMW's thermostat's at the radiator. You still need a thermostat. So how do you adapt from this to a -6AN or -8AN? The 8H or the Hemi Jeep swap guys, what they're doing, like it or not, they're taking a tap and just running a tap into this. I don't think they're drilling the hole to make it a specific size. I think whatever size tap they're using, I think it's a half 20 tap or half pipe thread. They're just running it in, pipe thread, bam, we're done. Some guys get wigged out about this. I have never done it this way. You definitely can get the tap not going straight. You definitely run the risk of not getting all the metal shavings out of this. It's not the way I did it. What I have done is on eBay, on the Hemi Swap guys, they sell these adapters. And this is pretty slick. It's running the same O-ring fitting that stock Dodge stuff use, and it just smushes into place. You smush it into place, and the bolt hole lines up, and it all seals up, right? And there's different length ones. This is a pretty slick, clean way to do this. He makes two different kits. I must go like that, and then this was over the top. So there you go. Makes sense. So, and then now a regular fitting can go into this. So that's pretty slick. The other way that, which I have on my Jeep, because I have a drive shaft right here. I have very tight clearance right here. I can't have this fitting sticking at the side. So the same guy on eBay makes a kit that makes an O-ring block, and then it's 90 degrees facing out this way. And you can run a -6 or -8 O-ring in them. I forgot which one it is. I believe it's -6. Super slick. You can't screw it up. It's very nicely machined, and it just bolts in. So that's my recommendation for how to get to an oil cooler from the factory stuff. The other thing to be very, very aware is all of the AHP stuff is not the same. So if this is a 8HP out of a BMW, these are in different places. This bolt hole is in a different place. If it's a 8HP 55, this is different. If it's an 8HP 45, these are different. They're not all the same. So you have to know which 8HP you have, which you want to run, and which adapter you need, because they're all different. So you can't just say, oh, it's an 8HP. They're different. So pay close attention with that. And the 5 HP and 6 HPs, not even close. That's oil cooler stuff. You don't need a huge oil cooler. So if you're running a hot rod Mustang or hot rod Camaro or whatever, and you run a radiator with a cooler in it, that is plenty. This actually works really, really good for this, because the temperature in the radiator helps keep this thing at the right temperature. That covers most of the gritty details on putting these things into something else. The other question that gets asked a lot is the size of this. How does this compare size to something else? So let's say if you put this side by side to a 4L80E, they're almost identical in length for the four-wheel drive units. Now, mind you, the two-wheel drive and the extension shafts change slightly, but four-wheel drive to four-wheel drive, they're the same within ½ inch. The bell housing dimension for a 4L80E to this is almost the same. It looks a little funny. It's a little less. 4L80Es are pretty sloped pretty quickly. This is a slight slower taper, but it has all these embossments for whatever they were doing. Like, I cut these off to clearance things. So here is a 340A or an A340 out of a Toyota. So you can kind of see side by side, this is a very small transmission, and this fits inside of it. So inside that tunnel without any clearancing, without any modifications, other than grinding away some of the casing, it fit 1-to-1. Oh, the only other thing to talk about, this is more into the Jeep guys, the hot rod guys might be interested in it, is the transmission pans. On most of the stock applications, the pan is the filter. So you take the pan off, The filter's included, and there's an O-ring that connects it to the valve body. They break pretty easily. The factory ones tend to be leaking. So anytime you do a transmission service, you replace that plastic pan. It's the filter also. There is a company that does a deep aluminum pan. I have one in the Toyota, so you might be able to take a picture of that. It's a very nice unit. You do need a factory gasket and all the factory hardware and bolts to use it. So unfortunately, in my wife's case, when I installed hers, we had to buy a pan and filter kit just to get the gasket out of it to fit this aftermarket pan. But it works fantastic. So like I have that in this one. It adds about 1.5 quarts to 2 quarts of fluid to the transmission. Can't go wrong there. It's a nice solid cast aluminum piece. So it's very, very strong. It's ribbed. It has a place for a cooler temperature sensor or transmission temperature sensor on the side of it. It has a drain plug and a nice replaceable filter. The other option that a lot of the Jeep guys do, especially in the Jeep Hemi swaps, is they take a pan off of the Land Rovers. The Land Rovers had a stamped steel pan and a gasket on them. I have not seen a ton of them because half the Land Rovers are running the plastic and half are running the steel. I have also was told that the late model Jeep JTs, which are the Gladiators, had an 8 HP in them with a steel pan. I've not seen one myself, but I know it's out there. I know if you go search in the Jeep JK Hemi swap stuff, you can find the steel pan option with the part number, but it's a Dodge part number that they use, or the Land Rover part number for a steel pan. Otherwise, it's a plastic panel. That wraps up what I have for 8 HP stuff. I'm sure I've missed something. I'm sure there's questions. I'm pretty active on YouTube. So if you post some comments, questions, I will definitely respond to them. Yeah, let me know what you got. And if I didn't cover something, at least we'll cover in the comments. If not, we can make another video. Like and subscribe if you like content like this.